city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been fucking amazing for the last 10 years.
Let me start off with a Twitch feed this morning, and I got to get the whole name right. Mile High Hockey Lab.
The city of Denver, the state of Colorado, you guys have been...
Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Hello and welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab. My name, as always, is Adrian Hernandez. I'm here with Evan and Ezra. We are here to talk Colorado Avalanche hockey, and it feels like we are just right on the cusp of the most exciting part of the year. Almost time for regular season hockey. And with that said, we have some pretty substantial topics today. Thank you for the two of you for joining me today.
As always, thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Heck yeah. So if absolutely, man. Thank you. If you folks are listening or watching on your preferred streaming platform, be sure to subscribe, like, and share with your fellow Colorado Avalanche fans. We also have a lot of articles and tons more content on the website, milehighhockey.com. And you can follow us at Mile High Hockey on X. So let's drop the puck and talk Colorado Avalanche hockey. I'll send this very first one to Mr. Managing Editor Evan. So pretty exciting night the other night with Olausson netting the overtime winner after a long and grueling overtime. It feels like the preseason is basically over with just one game left against Dallas. And with Olausson really making a push, who do you see Colorado going with on their fourth line opening night on October 11th?
You know, it's such a good question. And just to clarify, there are two more games left, Dallas and then Vegas on Thursday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon
You're
me.
good.
I think I wrote in the script that the preseason was over. So I've completely moved on, apparently.
That's where we're all at. Right? And that's what it felt like Sunday night with that overtime game. I had even, posted about it. I was like, why am I stressing this much about a preseason overtime hockey game, right?
Yeah, bless you for staying in tune with that one.
I know. It was a very ridiculous overtime. I can only imagine if that McKinnon move had gone in, that downtown Denver would have exploded. But anyway, to actually answer the question, because it is definitely like some good competition there, right?
Yeah.
Riley Tufte is making it a real tough choice, no pun intended. And you obviously have Frederick Olofsson as well, Yoel Kiviranta. You could really go with like any of those guys. And of course there's Ben Myers and Curtis McDermott too. Like I feel like it's honestly a matter of who does Jared Bednar want to fit in the system? Does he want somebody who's already played with them before in a Ben Myers or a Curtis McDermott, so they'll know what they're doing, but maybe not have as much quality as one of these new guys like Olofsson or Kiviranta or Tufte? I feel like that's a tough decision to make there. I think just knowing Bednar, I think he would want someone who knows the system, knows the culture. Right. And so therefore it'll likely still end up being one of Myers or McDermott, which maybe isn't the answer that people want or are looking for. But I feel like that just still seems the most likely. But you never know. Maybe something in these last two preseason games will change his mind.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like you are on the right track in terms of Bednar preferring guys who know the system. But I wonder if that's more true later in the season, and if we'll see him kind of experiment and maybe find out if some of these younger guys have bought into the system and have a deeper understanding for it than maybe they've showed in live regular season action so far. I like that you're keying a little bit on Tufte, but you started just rattling off names. And it seems like it's been a while since we've been able to do that about Colorado's forward depth. Ezra, do you feel like that's true? And like perhaps we've finally gotten enough depth in that forward group to really experiment and possibly come up with a really dangerous lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the sheer number of options, like you're saying.
Yeah.
We've got a real battle for these last couple roster spots, and one of them is going to go to Curtis McDermott, who's probably not going to play very many games. Frankly, he's going to be on the roster just to be in the locker room. It sounds like,
Right.
which is a choice, but we don't have to get into that. But but we've got other guys who can step up and really take that ice time. We know Ben Myers. Well, we know that the Dallas boys have been battling for that extra spot in Kiviranta, Tufte, and Olofsson. And
Olofsson.
if I had to make a guess, I'd say just because Ben Myers can go to the AHL without going through waivers, he's going to be the odd man out there. He's going to be in Loveland to start the year. First injury call up probably at forward, but we'll see probably Olofsson and Tufte make the roster. Kiviranta have to hit waivers. If I'm just speculating based on what I've seen so far, it seems like Olofsson's a really good fit for Bednar on that fourth line, and that's really exciting. We don't have a lot of like high end depth. Is still
right.
That's the one thing I will add. Unless Oscar Olausson really jumps up and feels ready to be a middle six forward, we're mostly looking at bottom six kind of depth,
for sure,
which is a really good thing to have. Don't get me wrong, but if there are a lot of injuries in the top six, then we're looking at more minutes for Arturi Lehkonen probably, which is a good thing. We like him, but beyond that, a bit of a who's going to step up and learn how to play some offense.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that might be, if we're being like completely honest looking at this roster, it seems like they're trying to, as I always say, the Billy Beane approach, make up in the aggregate with multiple forwards for maybe like points lost to teams in the past and comparables, just maybe in terms of production. But I don't know that it's that simple. I do think that the Avalanche have done a good job of addressing specific needs and finding guys that should play into the system. That said, we talked a little bit last week about the defensive group. Now we've seen some more games, and we kind of have a better picture of that D group, with Makar and Manson supposedly going to get a game tomorrow, or in the next couple of games, I guess, since I thought there was only one left. But they're supposed to at least play one. What does that tell you about the Avalanche defensive group? And are we still of the opinion that they should probably find somebody on the waiver wire? Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still definitely at least somewhat of a concern when it comes to this Avs defense, because I mean the top six is pretty much set, right? That is not going to change. Wyatt Amat just got sent down earlier today. He might have some opportunities to jump in there along with Sam Malinsky, who I think is probably the 7th or 8th D now, especially if they're still trying to roll with McDermott at forward. Yeah. So, I think perhaps maybe, but I feel like it would be a little bit tougher to bring on a defender from waivers, at least, just because there are less of them, quite frankly.
For sure.
So we'll have to kind of see what happens. But I also do want to touch on the forward really quickly. When we talk about names that have kind of gone through the system, we kind of went through this last year when I went back and thought about it. We had Lucas Sedlak, we had Dryden Hunt, we had Dennis Malgin, but Sedlak in particular, he played 2 games and then was gone, right? Theoretically, we could lose another player on waivers early on in the season because Bednar doesn't like him in the first 2 games, right? Who knows, right? So again, it's all just a matter of wait and see kind of deal with both the forwards and defenders. And you still have to put into question too, will they get a goaltender on waivers? Of course, fan favorite Jonas Johansson will not be here for a 3rd year in a row, most likely. Since he has to cover Vasilevsky's back surgery he got. So we'll really see kind of what happens in this final preseason game. But I think Bednar also said it, I don't know if it was earlier today or after the game last night, but he pretty much said that their lineup is starting to come into form, like starting to shape up, and that at least by Thursday's game in Vegas, they'll likely play a pretty set roster lineup for what it's going to look like on opening night.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned possibly losing a player on the waiver wire, because as you mentioned, Kiviranta, you see possibly being the easier person to put on waivers with the ability to hide Ben Myers' availability in the AHL, which is kind of why like I cheated a little bit on my bold prediction, because that's kind of what I was keying on, which is that they'd be safe to put him down there and bring him up later and not have him go on waivers, because I think it's just the better call, and it just makes sense for him too. I think in the projection of his career in this year so far, he'll build some confidence. We'll see about whoever takes his place on that fourth line. If it's not a problem, we'll have a real competition. If it is still a problem, he can get called up and see what he's got too. So getting back though to the defenders and the waiver wire, Evan says they're hard to come by, but is there anyone on the waiver wire or potentially that you see potentially being on the waiver wire that the Avs could target defensively?
Yeah, there is. I actually was looking through Cap Friendly to see which teams had a really solid top six and a definite couple of extra bodies that they might be looking to cut, or that they might be forced to cut. And three jumped out at me. The first one I'll mention is from the New Jersey Devils.
Okay.
Somebody that, the name alone might make you want to pick him up, and that's Cal Foote. He's looking like the odd man out on that blue line. I don't know that his play style is exactly what the Avs want. He's not really great with the puck. He's, I think of him like his dad, which isn't accurate. He's not that kind of mean player, but he's not that skilled defenseman that the Avs typically covet. So he's not really a fit, but he is only $800,000 a year on his contract. He'd be an option as an extra defenseman. The next one I'm going to mention is from Carolina, Dylan Coughlin. Similar to Cal in the way that he plays. He's kind of a bigger body, not huge by any means. Both of these guys are 6'2", but plays well in his own defensive zone, not so great in the offensive zone. And then the one I'd be most excited about if he became available is from the New York Islanders, Robin Salo. I really like this kid's game. He's a two-way defenseman by like the pure definition of two-way defenseman. He's not really good at either side, but he's really good at both, if that makes sense. And I think he'd be a fantastic fit in the Colorado system. He's a great skater, and if he became available, I think that would be something that they really, really, really should consider. If he passes through waivers completely, I'll be shocked because I think he's really got a lot of upside. But if he makes it to Colorado and the Avs don't take him, I'll be pretty disappointed.
Well, it's funny. I look him up right now, 24 years old, Finnish. So we'll add another Finnish player to the roster, which would be nice. And he is, potentially a rosy-cheeked ginger as well. So another one of those cannot hurt. But yeah, that I love that. I also love his name, Salo. That would just, that one just rolls off the tongue. That would
back in the day.
And he wears number 2, so that's a cool number.
He's
so
not related to Tommy Salo, so you don't have to worry about anybody scoring on it from the red line.
Yeah, there you go.
He's not a goalie either, but I had to make a joke.
That's pretty good though. That's reaching deep into the bag.
A reference
right there.
just for our older listeners.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in terms of relation, you also mentioned Cal Foote, and obviously every Avalanche fan's feelers kind of start moving around when they hear Cal Foote's name. But I agree with you in terms of like his play style, maybe not fitting not only the Avalanche, but kind of like the future defender of the NHL, to be kind of, not to be too frank, but that's just like, he was a part of a really good team and a team that's known to promote and develop defenders really well in the Tampa Bay Lightning. And that may have kind of come along. We'll see if he makes the roster in New Jersey and stuff like that. But I do think his development, the name and everything, we probably expected a little bit more. And I don't know if he's kind of a fit like you mentioned. But Evan, what are your comments? He also, as we're also mentioned, Dylan Coughlin. Of the three, who do you like the most?
Oh, I think Cal Foote is the one that I like the most of it. And I'll be honest, I don't really know much of the other two. So I think Cal Foote would be the one that would be kind of the most interesting there. And we've seen him play, against the Avs before. I don't know if the other two have or not, but I mean, we know Cal Foote has that family connection that would only probably make him adored even more in Colorado. And I know that when the summer started and we were looking at possible players to come in, that Cal Foote did interest at least a few of us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why not, right? If he becomes available, why not?
Yes, I Also, I
Yeah,
mean,
he
Ezra
might
mentioned he's
be
only
on the roster
800K,
now.
so yeah. If he's
All
only
of these guys are
800,000, yeah,
yeah.
that's nice. Yeah, so I mean,
Coughlin
those are
from
three
one.
really good options in my opinion. I think I do like Robin the best as well, just based on his two-wayness. I like how you put it. Like he's not a great defender, but he's also not a great offensive guy, but he's good enough at both, basically, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that fits, except for maybe in that 7, 6, and 7 D role, you just want that lockdown guy. The dude who just
Yeah.
sends it down the ice, even if it's an icing, that kind of guy who just is that's what I think of when I think of Jack Johnson and Eric Johnson, how they've played recently. It's just no nonsense, get that thing out and protect the net.
Totally. And all three of these guys are on the younger side. Salo's 24, Coughlin and Foote are 25. So if the team is looking at like who can we get to be a trusted veteran to jump in from the 7D spot, these aren't those guys. But
yeah,
I do think that if they're looking at somebody who can come in, have some upside, and play that 5-6 spot, I guess 6 because 5 is clearly
Manson.
Gerard or Manson.
Yeah,
but yeah, it would make sense to me to go for somebody with some upside.
Yeah, that's true. And talking upside and getting back to Evan's point, say what you will, but Cal Foote's a first round 14th overall pick. So there's potentially still some upside there. 24 years old, like we said earlier. He's got a big frame, 6'5", 224. And wouldn't it be cool to see that name on a jersey again? And would his dad give him permission to wear it, or is it just not a thing? Since isn't that one in the rafters, or am I tripping?
It is. It is. That's a good question.
Number, that's for sure.
Right? He just wears 53 because he's one better than his dad.
What number does he wear now?
Let's see.
I don't know. I didn't think about that. That's a good point, though. I also did just remember that Brad Hunt exists. So Hunt might actually end up being the 7th D, and then probably Malinsky, unless they bring somebody in who wants to, who can play in the AHL, wants to play in the AHL, and maybe be behind a couple of guys. Was it
him or who ended up the Eagles captain?
It was Brad Hunt. It is.
So okay, so do you think that holds any weight in terms of where he finishes in the lineup, or is it? I guess it's kind of a dumb question. Like if he's the best, he's of the best forwards, he's going to be playing for the Avalanche. I just wonder though, like then does captaincy really matter in the AHL to you guys?
I mean, not particularly. I mean, Brad Hunt played a lot of games with the Avs last year. I think he played more games with the Avs than the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken. But that was also simply just because of the nature of injury
riddled. Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly. If it would necessarily matter or not, at least for Brad Hunt and the Eagles' sake. But regardless, he's still with the Avs, and the Eagles started their training camp today. So I think that kind of is telling at least a little bit of something.
I mean, I guess we'll get into this in my next segment, but I wonder if the Avs do nothing, are we still going to be cool with it? Like when we get to opening night, if they do nothing and they come up with a version of the roster with who they have now, maybe give or take losing a couple of guys due to, dropping them and putting them on waivers and whatnot. Are we going to be worried, or is it just kind of like a prove it time? Ezra, what do you think?
That kind of excites me actually, because that means they're giving Annunen a shot, which I like. I'd prefer they don't pick up a goalie. I think Annunen's been good. And that means that, in my mind, that means probably that they're going with their 6D unless somebody gets hurt. And if somebody gets hurt, they'll find another solution. Because it just doesn't seem like Sam Malinsky's quite ready, and it doesn't seem like Brad Hunt is really what they want in a 7D. Because I mean, he filled in admirably last year, but he is a puck-moving type. He should be down with the Eagles leading that team, bringing up the young kids. I think that's the fit that they envision. That's why they made him captain down there.
Right.
So, I think that's exciting because that means that they're looking to make the players that they have right now, give them opportunity, and specifically with Annunen, and make a change if they need to on the defensive side, which I think bringing in another defenseman makes sense. But whether that's waivers, if they don't like anybody on waivers, fine, they don't take anybody. But then that means that they're going to be looking around the league for opportunity
Yeah.
to audition if Jack Johnson doesn't hold up for 82 games, you know, or
Exactly.
anywhere else. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I like, you know, you made me think of something in that comment, which is even if they acquire somebody, it might not be specifically for the role of 6 or 7D. It might be to be an 8D because you have that 7 in your mind and you just want a little bit more depth back there. And I I agree with you. I'm excited by the prospect of the Avalanche doubling down on what they have. Not only because I think they have some good players that just kind of haven't gotten the opportunity. I think that's been the case for some years. And I also feel like that's a vote of confidence from the administration of the Colorado Avalanche themselves to say, you know, we're good with what we've got. We're confident, and we think these guys have grown in a way that we can kind of just let it roll, especially in terms of Anunen. I agree with you. It would be really nice to see him actually step into the backup role for a moment in time and really get a accurate assessment of where he is in terms of his development and where he is in terms of being an NHL goaltender. With that said, we know for sure that Josh Manson and Cale Makar are NHL players, but what we don't know for sure is where they are in terms of their health. We've been told by Jared Bednar, according to a few sources, that both are slated and on track to play in at least one preseason game. We've talked about the last game possibly being the game we see most starters. Two-parter for you, Evan. Is that the game you predict that they'll both play, or do you think they'll be staggered? And then the second question is, what are you looking for from each of them in order to instill some confidence going into the season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Answer your first part. I think it will only be the second game where they'll both be playing, simply just because they have not been on the ice all that much.
Gotcha.
I think Makar has only skated, I think maybe 3 or 4 times since he first started last week. So not very much. And then the same goes for Manson, right? Still recovering from his injury, which I saw was actually specified earlier today. I'm going to try and find it really quickly. But I mean, the expectation for them is the same, right? It is to perform at a high level. It is to perform, it is supposed to be like what Manson was paid for, right? After winning the cup. So his injury that he recovered from, he tore his QL oblique in game 2 or 3 of the playoffs, according to Ryan Boulding of NHL.com. So I don't know what that is. I'm not a doctor, but ouch. It sounds like that hurts.
And like the side of your lower back.
Yeah.
Oof, yeah. And we know the injury struggles he went through last year, right? Manson in particular. So I think, honestly, for him, his expectations are probably lower than Makar's. I just simply want him to have a healthy game, just get his feet under him, really get set for the start of the season. And then for Makar's sake, I mean, along the similar lines, but you also want him to be Cale freaking Makar, right? That's just who he is. And Cale's not going to back down. We know that. Even though apparently, according to some reports, that he's one of the most arrogant players in the world. But he's
I fell for the troll.
Most arrogant player and the most arrogant team in the league. But no, I think Makar is going to want to do what he can, even at 95%. We obviously just hope that he stays at 100% or gets to 100% and then stays at 100%, through the season.
Yeah. For me, that's just such a slippery slope because we saw him play so much last season. And sometimes it's not as simple as like, is Cale healthy? It's also a matter of how healthy is the rest of the lineup. Because if he's relied upon like he was playing like 30 minutes a night, some nights, that's not good for a guy who's not all the way healthy. So that's something I'm kind of concerned about. But I'm with you. I think he's Cale Makar, and there's a certain mindset that he has to have in order to be the kind of guy he is. And it'll be tough to keep him from playing if he feels well enough to play. I just can't help myself. But with him, with a superstar like that, think about everything in terms of long term. And so I'm like, maybe he should miss just a couple of games to start the year, feel like he's being held back and he needs to go now, and then let him out, let him just go nuts and see how he really feels. I will say I looked it up, and I'm not a doctor, but Ezra, you're right. It's like the QL oblique that Manson's struggling with is a muscle that connects your spine to like your hips in the back area. So that's brutal, especially for a hockey player. There's a lot of stress in your hips and back, obviously, from skating. So we'll see how the two of them fare. What I'm kind of looking for is just that ease of movement. Like you can tell, especially when people are skating, if there's uncomfortability or unfamiliarity or possibly some tentativeness. If we don't see that from them, I'll be impressed. And I also am hoping that Bednar tests them out, sees that they're good, and then doesn't play them for the last two periods. Ezra, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as they get through the games healthy, it's good to get a tune-up. I don't have a whole lot of, it's a preseason game. I don't really care too much what happens, but I do want them to get on the ice. That'd be really good and get through it healthy.
Yeah, I guess that's the main thing is do it, show that you can, but just go home healthy.
Totally.
Yeah, well, it's nice to know that it seems to me like the room is optimistic. The coaches are optimistic. And I feel like as long as everybody who's said to be on the track to good health is indeed on the track to good health, the Avalanche are in a really good position to once again win the Central Division. Unless Wikipedia lied to me, I'm pretty sure this is the third straight season that they'll have won the Central Division. I know Wikipedia is something you can enter yourself, but I've tried to make the Avalanche the reigning undefeated Central Division champions since their existence, and it just never sticks. So that being said,
if they win this upcoming season, it would be their fourth straight.
Fourth straight?
Yeah.
Even better.
2021, technically West Division.
Oh, okay.
And then 2021.
So technically not because it's the Central, right? Whatever.
The fourth straight division title.
There we go. Let's go with that. So who in the division as it's currently constructed do you guys imagine will be the Avalanche's most, hotly contested opponent and the most big threat, great words there, to their third or fourth straight divisional title? Evan, you go. Holy moly.
Man, do we need to do an evaluation? Yeehaw! I'm just kidding.
Somebody get this kid a Red Bull.
I think kind of the easy answer here is Dallas. Dallas has improved. They have the guy who always seems to score against the Avs now, Matt Duchene, playing.
Go with the other one, Joe Pavelski.
And Joe Pavelski too, of course. And Dallas has not had a ton of turnover in an already very successful last season to this season. And when you look at, I think they had 16 overtime losses last year or something like that. Even if like three of those are wins in over. Ooh, English, Evan. Goodness, we're both struggling, Adrian.
It's contagious.
If even three of those 16 are wins in overtime or in the regular season, they win last year's Central Division. Easy put. Yeah. They are definitely the biggest threat for the Avs in the Central Division, and then from there on out, you could debate a good number of teams, and there was a whole debate about it in our Slack channel not too long ago. I'm sure we can discuss further.
Well, and you mentioned Dallas, which I agree. I think that's going to be an apparent, like a clear rival too, as things kind of come around. You mentioned some Avs killers being a part of the roster, and that means we're going to not like them more than likely. Obviously, Minnesota is a rival every season, and they've gotten more competitive within that rivalry. Where do you guys, and Ezra, I love this question for you. Where do you feel as Arizona fits into the divisional rivalries, and how does that work with the Avalanche? Because it seems like there's been some animosity.
I mean, there's definitely been some animosity. I think especially with, a couple years back with Connor Garland there. But he's not there anymore. So, I don't think we're going to see Nathan MacKinnon throw a helmet at anybody. But, okay. I think ultimately with Arizona, they are a team that is likely to be on the rise, and if they manage to really push and like be in the playoff mix, then that's going to heighten their heated rivalry. But I don't see it. I don't know. I think they're going to be better, but they're not good
Not
yet.
there
They
yet.
don't really.
Yeah.
They just don't have the top end for me. Where I'm like, oh, okay, I can really see this. Like people got really excited about the. It's not Cutter Gauthier. Who's the guy? Who's their rookie center?
Oh, why can't I think of his name?
Oh man, I want to call him Cutter Gauthier so bad, but that's a different guy. I just can't ever let go of that name, Cutter. It's so weird.
He was just drafted, right? Or am I
No,
going?
last year, not this
Last
past draft, but the
Logan,
year before.
was it Logan Cooley?
Logan Cooley, thank you.
Logan
Yeah.
Cooley, there it is.
Logan Cooley. Logan Cooley had that awesome
Yes.
goal in the preseason, right? That everybody was like, "Oh my God, Arizona's finally got their center," but it's also the only goal he's
Yeah.
scored in preseason. He's not really there yet. You know, he's exciting, but he's not there yet. And I just don't know what to really make of that roster as like an actual contender. So for me, they're not fully rivals yet, just because they're not good enough yet. The defense looks shaky. The goaltending better than it looks on paper, I think. I think both those guys have middling reputations, Vejmelka and Ingram, but are actually pretty good. So they can steal games, and they stole a lot of games at home last year. That's very true. Whatever reason, the curse of Mullet Arena, I think it's just like teams going in and being like, "Are we seriously playing?"
Yes, the other team going, "What the hell is this?"
And so they get shaken a little bit. But that was last year's for the first time. This year, they know what to expect, and I really don't think that Arizona can repeat that home success.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they can have much away success. So for me, they're just not quite there.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I feel, and maybe this is not the case for this team, but it probably could be argued. Chicago, obviously, Connor Bedard is there now. Are they going to be similar where they're better but not quite good yet? Now, Evan, take into consideration that they've also brought in guys like Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, Corey Perry. So it feels a little bit like they're trying to kind of, at the very least, surround Bedard with a certain level of talent and acumen in order to kind of bring the best out of him. Where do you see the Blackhawks fitting into the division this season?
Sure. I mean, you mentioned those names, right? And they are big caliber names, as you mentioned before. But name any other Chicago Blackhawks player besides those ones. Right?
Okay, I got one, Seth Jones, but you're right. After that, I got nothing.
I can name Seth Jones and Athanasiou, and that is it. Like, there's no one else beyond that. And while Connor Bedard has looked stupidly good during the preseason, even though he hasn't scored a goal yet, you cannot just put the weight of the world and the weight of an entire franchise on an 18-year-old rookie's shoulders. I don't think anyway. They didn't really do that with McKinnon when he came to the Avs at 18. Sure, he was the same kind of hot superstar that he was. But there was a lot of other factors around McKinnon that got them to success in that season.
Yeah.
And you might have to look it up. I don't know if McDavid made it in the playoffs his rookie year. But yeah, he didn't. So I don't see them being all too good. I think they're going to be pretty much bottom of the Central, whether regardless on what Bedard does during the season.
And they should want that. Like that's ideal for them because they need more people to come support that the core of Bedard and right. So they really need to tank. Even though they already tanked for Bedard, they need to keep it going.
They need to continue the tank, baby. Well, we've talked about. Go ahead, Evan.
I was just gonna say, I feel like the real battle is gonna be like Minnesota Dallas and the Avs, up top. It'll be Minnesota probably a little bit behind, and then towards the bottom it'll be like Chicago. The real interesting battle is going to be right in the middle.
Yeah.
Who gets that 4 through 7, or even 3 through 7 technically.
Reds, Blues, and Jets that we haven't touched on either. So that's Blues. Who knows? They feel like they're going down. But do you guys feel like the Blues have made any offseason acquisitions or moves that kind of move the needle in their direction a little more, or are we kind of still feeling like the Avs broke them?
Not at all. I think they're broken. I think if Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou really step up and figure out how to lead a team as the top offensive weapons, they have a chance at competing for the playoffs. But if they don't, them and the Predators are on their way out, I think, for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. It feels like the Predators are kind of trying to reassess things. The Blues, other than Bennington, feel the same way. What about the Jets? The Jets are kind of like Canada's least talked about team, but they might, in my opinion, be one of the better Canadian teams in the league. What are your thoughts on the Winnipeg Jets? Either one of you.
I mean, here's the thing about the Jets is that they started off, white hot, as we'll say, since it works out well for them. They started off really, really well last year, and I think it kind of took people by surprise, right? But you have to remember too, they faltered big time in the spring before the playoffs started. They just squeaked into the playoffs by 2 points over Calgary and Nashville. And we're honestly kind of lucky to make it before obviously being taken apart by the eventual Stanley Cup champions. So I feel like Winnipeg, they are a very interesting team to look at, as you said, Adrian. They are definitely the least talked about team in Canada, probably because they're the one that doesn't involve the most drama out of them. Let's just be honest. And you kind of forget that they're there sometimes, and maybe that's a good thing for them, right? Mm-hmm. If you can get Connor Hellebuck to just keep doing his thing without people recognizing it, who knows what can happen, right? The Avs have been goalied by him multiple times. Right. So you never know what Connor Hellebuck could do for that team. Same goes with their offense. They're just a very interesting team to see, and they're hard to read, I think.
They're rocking Mason Appleton, Kyle Connor, Alex Follow, Adam Lowry.
I was going to say Patrick Laine, but he's not there anymore.
Nino Niederreiter, Cole Perfetti, Mark Scheifele, of course.
Scheifele. Mm-hmm.
Dominic Toninato, remember that name. Velarde. So, I mean, I guess where they seem potentially thin, I don't know. Are they thin on the back end to you guys? Nate Schmidt, decent, coming back from a weird season. Pionk, love that name. Hate him. Just kidding. He seems to be one of those guys who scores weird goals against the Avs too. But
who's the Ekholm? Isn't Ekholm there too? Matthias Ekholm, or did he go the other way? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I'm looking at their roster. I don't see.
He's in Edmonton.
Yeah, Edmonton. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, he's in Edmonton.
So Ezra, what do you think of the Jets? Like, where do they land? Because we were kind of starting to talk about how the division will sort out at the end of the day. Where does that figure for you in the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, I think that they were in a position where leaning into a rebuild made a lot of sense, and they did not do it. So they're now stuck in kind of a limbo, which a lot of teams find themselves in. They're in that, like, what used to be called like the Canucks zone, or I don't know. They're like, people in sports media had names for it, but they really do remind me of Canucks team or a Flames team that is just like not going to miss the playoffs. They refuse, but they're not going to be good enough to really do anything with it. And obviously the Canucks have missed the playoffs, so you see where that gets you sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's like the attitude, not the reality. You know what I mean? So I don't know. They have Connor Hellebuck, which that's a huge deal. He's a great player. And they have a decent defense core. I like Morrissey a lot. I like Pionk a lot. Dylan DeMello and Nate Schmidt are serviceable, but the rest of the guys, Brendan Dillon people like, but I don't really. And then on offense, they have some young, interesting pieces, but mostly it's guys who we know who they are, and who they are isn't the high end of their position on the roster. Like Mark Scheifele is not a high end number one. He's a number one center, but he's not a high end number one center. Adam Lowry's a number three center, but he's not a high end number three center. So it's just a roster that's not quite good enough to scare me, but not bad enough where I'm like, oh, they're done. But they should have rebuilt completely and tanked. That's what they should have done. But that's okay.
Hey, it's I can never do that when I'm playing NHL. I just try and go to the free agent market and sign as many guys and trade as many people as I can. So I can't really hate on him.
I do want to add though, I really liked the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. I think they got
Yeah.
a ton of good pieces back, and if like Velarde and Kupari end up being second line players, not third line players, then they have some really solid depth, and they
Yeah.
could maybe be like a Seattle Kraken where they kind of do it by committee.
And that trade looks real good too if that happens. So you're
Oh,
right
yeah.
about that. Yeah. So totally. So based on that, I feel like we've kind of settled in on the fact that it's going to be Avs, Stars, and Wild, kind of duking it out, seeing who lands where. And honestly, we talked about this a lot going into the playoffs last season. But how important is it to secure home ice? Are you cool with one or two, or is it just one or nothing for you guys? Evan, you go first.
I mean, I feel like at this point we've gotten used to winning divisions, right, and getting that home ice advantage. Unfortunately, we did see how that can be an issue, or how you can't take advantage of it in the playoffs like last season, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think though you should get first in the division. That should be the goal, right? You shouldn't want to come in second or third. So for me, it's one or bust. Honestly, two wouldn't be the end of the world. Three would be then where we maybe have some problems.
Well, man, now that you mention it, I'm like, do you even want home ice advantage? Our last cup, we secured every series on the road and had the cup in the house, game 5, packed lid or packed to the brim at the Ball Arena. And not that they fell short, but they fell short at the end of the day. And I can't help but think of the fact that although my dude Nate Dogg is a Stanley Cup champion now and he's got that monkey off his back, he still hasn't won a game 7 in the playoffs. As one of the more probably like a top 10 dominating playoff performer. It's kind of a crazy statistic to think about. So,
and now that I think about it too, because obviously they played Game 7 at home last season, but the last Game 7 before that was away to the San Jose Sharks in 2019. And that game was actually pretty good. The Avs stepped it up. And we can talk about Landeskog wasn't offsides. For another hour or two here. But you make a good point. Like, could they go and upset a Vegas in Game 7 in T-Mobile Arena in Vegas? Like, who knows, right? So I don't know. I just think it would be better to have that support in front of your fans, but then again, who knows really how much
it's just a kind of a weird, I don't know, conundrum, because it's like they also were absolutely dominant at home in the regular season that season. And so it meant a lot. I think that comfortability went a long ways. But at the same time, we heard the rhetoric, Ezra, about like, oh, the road is just better for guys because they get closer as a group. It's less distractions and yada, yada. Where does the home ice advantage stuff fit into your priorities this season?
Well, I think ultimately with that cup run, what made them win on the road wasn't necessarily that they were on the road, but more that they knew they were like, we're not going to let this thing go home. You know what I mean? And they were ending series before Game 7. They weren't letting series stretch long.
Yeah. Correct.
And so I think you can do that with any series, no matter where home ice advantage lies. But ultimately, having the advantage in seeding is more for me about who you're playing than it is about if you're playing at home or away. I would much rather be facing, the 8th seeded Winnipeg Jets than the 3 seeded Minnesota Wild if I'm the Avalanche. So I'm just throwing out numbers, and I don't think they're accurate for how things work. But you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So
that's kind of how we talked about Seattle, right? Going in.
That's true. The Seattle series, though, I mean, the Avalanche nearly beat them with nobody left alive. So I think that honestly supports my argument, not hurts it.
I'd agree. Well, the way I always put it is the Seattle Kraken beat the shadow of the Colorado Avalanche.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I mean, I think winning the division is huge, and it also gives the guys a sense of accomplishment that or like in a sense of confidence in themselves that like, yeah, obviously we're the best team here, which I think
Yeah.
they already think they're the most arrogant team in the league. But it's important. But I do think it's important to have that at your back when you're going for a cup.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because everyone's like, "Oh, well, the rest of that quote from Kane was that they won, so they deserve to be arrogant." And it's like, yeah, well, the rest of that quote is him qualifying his jab. So don't act like he's sitting there giving praise. What he's saying is, yeah, they won last time, but they still think and act like they're the Stanley Cup champions, which they aren't anymore. Now that is the Vegas Golden Knights. But we learned how hard it is to repeat in the NHL on a health basis, mostly for the Colorado Avalanche last season. So we'll see how the Vegas Golden Knights do in their attempt to repeat. I honestly keep saying, for me to really, I don't know, the fairy tale ending to a season would be for McKinnon to beat the Vegas Golden Knights in a Game 7 with an overtime winner, get that monkey off his back, head back to the Cup, get your second in 3 years, maybe get McKinnon his Conn Smythe this time, maybe get McKinnon his heart this year, and that's kind of Ado going off to dreamland. So the crazy thing is all of that is possible. And
I was about to say, you have very realistic dreams.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that leaves us with one last segment, and it's the segment where we either are really cool and look like Nostradamus and predict the future, or we put our foot in our mouth. So
it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Let's get right into the bold predictions. Let's first check on last week's bold predictions, and I think most of us are potentially good. Let me see here. I have to be sure because I have a tendency to talk out the side of my what, and typically my bold predictions
not
are
as bad as the week before, for me at least.
Oh, I'm looking in the wrong place. That's why I'm like, where did they go? Okay. So here we go. We got my bold prediction is that Ben Meyers will be sent down to the AHL sooner than we think. Well, technically that hasn't happened yet, so I'll take the wrong on that. But it could potentially still be right. Depends on what you think was when he'd be sent down. But I think some people just don't think he's gonna be sent down, which is kind of why I made that prediction. Jackie's bold prediction was that Maros Jedlicka would get an AHL contract. What do you guys know about that?
Well, he got injured last night, so who knows now with him, unfortunately.
So we'll leave that one unanswered.
Yeah, it all hinges on how bad that is.
Plus, Jackie's not here, so when she comes back, we'll check back in with that one and see how it went. Ezra, your bold prediction last week was that Jeremy Hansel will get an AHL contract. Excuse me. Where are we at on that? We still don't know.
Well, he got sent back to Seattle. So I don't know if that would necessarily. He got sent back to Seattle. Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
Well, then I guess that means I think that's pretty much a sign that he's probably not gonna. I mean, well, I guess he could elsewhere, but I mean, probably not likely. Oh, okay. So yeah, no, not very likely. And then Evan, your bold prediction last week was we will be surprised that one big name will miss preseason altogether.
Technically, Manson and Makar could, but if they're likely to play, and we've already seen McKinnon ran in, then...
we need one of those. We need a new sound effect that's like, we don't know, not quite, or something like that. Because some of our bold predictions just do not resolve. It's usually because when the season comes around, we get to do it based on the games. So
that's true.
These aren't quite fitting into the time window. But that said,
we'll make these ones game predictions.
Let's get these ones within the week so we can have a resolution next week. Ezra, you go first. What's your bold prediction today?
I'm gonna go with the Avalanche.
The Avalanche claim a defenseman. I like it.
Yeah, the Avalanche claim a defenseman on waivers. who we didn't say, but we're excited about.
I like it. That sounded was like the international sound of preparation right there.
That should be the new sound for that. Like, we don't know.
Yeah, there you go. You're right.
Just flip that sound.
That sounds getting flipped for sure. Oh, that's so good. All right, Evan, your turn. What is your bold prediction?
All right. So we have 2 games left in this preseason. We have one in Dallas Tuesday night, and then in Vegas Thursday night on national TV with TNT. So they're getting their coverage started. And I think the Avs are going to put on a show for both of those games and win out the preseason. They're going to take the momentum they took from Sunday night's wild overtime win, and they'll finish out the preseason with a 4-0 run, which would then make them, 5-1 in the preseason? Yeah.
I love it. I hope that that's the case, because just winning is fun. And you want these young guys to get a taste of that, winning in the bigs, and bring some confidence back to the AHL. And then also, if the results find them on the big squad, that should mean they're coming in with some confidence. So I'm here for that.
Definitely.
So
it would be 4-2 now that I think of it.
Okay,
it would be 4-2, and they would
my bold
3, which is still good.
Yeah, I agree. My bold prediction is that in the remaining preseason games, we will see a hat trick from one of the Colorado Avalanche players. I think probably on the last night, when we might see really good NHL players against not so good, not NHL goalies. So we'll see how that sorts out. That kind of leaves us with nothing else to talk about, unless you guys have something possibly you want to touch on that I did not.
I don't think there is. I think there's not really much otherwise to it. I think we could go over more of the cuts, but I think there's been too many to keep track of as of late.
Yeah.
So who knows?
This one.
Is there anyone on the cut list that you didn't expect? We'll just leave it at that.
I'm surprised Amat didn't get another game, I guess, since he was just put on waivers today. I'm a little surprised he didn't at least get the Dallas game.
Okay.
I would get why he maybe wouldn't get the Vegas game on Thursday, but he didn't even get Dallas's tomorrow, and I thought he had done well in his last 2 appearances, that he at least earned a third, but I guess not.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I think that he was one of the better performers of the young guys. At least, I hate saying this, but at least in terms of like the eye test, it felt like he was kind of popping off the screen whenever he had the puck. He was putting it on net. Ezra, are you surprised that Amat didn't get more time?
Not really. I didn't think he was a realistic shot for the roster, and I just he got his chances and he did a lot, which is great. I'm happy for him. I think his future is brighter than I initially thought it would be. But no, it's time to trim that roster. He had to go.
Yeah. Well, it'll be. Go ahead, Evan.
I just thought of a new topic because we're scrolling through X right now and forgot that this was said earlier today. So it is Denver Nuggets Media Day. I know we don't cover the Nuggets here. But with the Larry O'Brien Trophy in the building, and Stan and Josh Kroenke both there talking to the media, they both mentioned a new practice facility for the Avs and Nuggets.
That's a great topic.
Yeah, that would be coming up, and that would be part of their first phase of redevelopment for that land, kind of all around Ball Arena, taking over Elitch Gardens and the parking lots all there, which would be interesting for sure to see how that plays out. It would make the Avs at least a little more centralized, kind of all there around Ball Arena versus having their practice facility, 30 minutes south down in Centennial. Yeah. But I don't know. What do we think about that?
I'll say this, and I don't want to sound reductive, because I think everybody involved with the Avalanche's current system and placement in terms of their practices and stuff, they do a great job of making the team comfortable. I will say though, the facility itself is pretty outdated and pretty small in comparison to kind of what business is being handled by the Avalanche. So I do think that a more focused practice facility will go a long way toward helping management even acquire some guys. because it's not that the current rink is like that big of Family Medicine's, or I think it's Family Sports Arena or something like that, right?
Family Sports.
It's not that it's a terrible rink or anything by that, but it's an opportunity. Like we see franchises like the Dallas Cowboys. If you've seen their practice facilities, it's not about just giving the players a place to practice. It's about giving players a premier place to excel at what they do, and a place that's aesthetically pleasing and that can kind of reel people in and be a part of the package that is playing for the Colorado Avalanche. So my opinion is this is a really, really good thing for both the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Specifically, I think it shows up on the ice in terms of free agent acquisitions and trades, stuff like that. Ezra, what do you think? It's an interesting topic. Thanks for bringing it up, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the facilities, to be honest. I've never seen them or anything, but it does seem like in general, the concept of having a more dedicated space that can be easier for all the players to access and get together at is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't really know enough to really comment.
Evan, you spent a lot of time over there this preseason. Tell me, like, what's your take on the matter?
Yeah, I mean the facility itself, I kind of agree with you. It is a little bit outdated, but especially in terms of like the fandom side of it, for sure.
Exactly.
There were a ton of people at training camp, and there, to be honest, the stands aren't super big for their practice rink. So there were people, lined up even like on the top area, just looking down. They weren't sitting down. They were standing and watching from there. So it would make sense to get a new practice facility. And I kind of like what you said too, Adrian, of like, it could bring in new free agents and be a new shiny toy, as we'll say, for drafts, if they want to bring in rookies, and then they'll be blown away by the new facilities, right? I mean, we've seen pictures of some NHL practice facilities. I think of Boston in particular, who just got a brand new one, and it's like overlooking this beautiful like valley, I think, of like trees or something like that. I have no idea, but it looked amazing, and I may not be the biggest Bruins fan, but hey, I would go practice there. I'd go play there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why not? So I think it would definitely be a good opportunity for the Avs to sharpen up their image, I guess, for lack of a better term, even though you don't really need to do that. So it's just a good way to, I think, centralize things and also attract more and different people to Denver.
Yeah, that's my thing. And like I said, I don't think it's a deterrent right now by any means. I don't think a guy's like, nah, I don't want to go play with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen because I don't want to practice there. Like, that's not happening. No. I will say, though, it does happen the other way. And that does happen. I just don't think it's the case here. But I think the Avalanche have an opportunity. It's interesting that you mentioned that, like, the fan area isn't very big and kind of, I imagine, I don't know, like not modern in terms of the seating arrangement and everything like that, and kind of monitors and stuff. So I feel like it's a huge and potentially awesome opportunity to bring fans even closer to the team. If you say there's a lot of people at training camp, well, if that facility to house training camp gets bigger and more fan friendly, while simultaneously making the team more comfortable, that's better for everybody, especially the really, really diehard fans. And that's kind of, in my opinion, what it's all about. If you're the Avalanche, you have to appeal to the people that are buying in the most to what it is you're doing. And at the end of the day, this is an entertainment industry, as much as people hate to admit it. And bringing fans in is important to entertaining your audience. So yeah, I'm excited. That'll be a cool thing. I wonder, like the thing I think about, which is kind of, I don't know, dorky, I guess, but there's always like cool memorabilia, some cool art, and some like concepts to the architecture. Like, for example, New York Jets have their training facility, and I only know this because I watched Hard Knocks, but they have a hallway that's 100 yards long, and every 10 yards there's a different kind of like mantra or achievement, and every 10 yards is an accomplishment in terms of like the week itself. and by the end of the season they'll have gone 100 yards to the end of the hallway. So like there's cool little, I don't know, like I guess Easter eggs that go into the creation of these facilities. So I'm excited to see what those are for the Colorado Avalanche. Yeah.
You mentioned concepts and stuff. There's nothing there yet. It was just comments made by the Cronkies, which, will always grab people's attentions. So we'll have to see kind of, where it develops in the upcoming years. This isn't going to be something that I doubt that this will be something that, in like next fall, there will be a new training facility.
Yeah. It didn't sound like there was a lot of urgency to those comments. So yeah,
it'll be at least a couple of years before that gets going for sure.
Well, hopefully it wasn't just like a placeholder for not ever doing anything at all, and that there are intentions, and we'll see those kind of come to life in the near future. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that does it for us here at the Mile High Hockey Lab. If you enjoyed what you've listened to, please head on over to our X. You can follow us at Mile High Hockey. You can also follow specifically this podcast at MHH_lab. You can also head over to the website, milehighhockey.com, for all of our recent articles. We do recaps, previews, opinion pieces, all things Colorado Avalanche. And Evan over here is the managing editor, and he's such a sweet guy. So you should definitely head on over there and check out what we work on. Evan, thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks again.
Yeah, and Ezra, my dude, had to leave just for a second there. So I just want to thank Ezra as well for joining the program. Wasn't able to get a sign off from him, but that's totally fine. That's kind of just how we do things around here. It's fun for us, right? It's fun for us. That's why we do what we do. So for me and the Mile High Hockey, I'm Adrian Hernandez. This has been the Mile High Hockey Lab. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and go Colorado Avalanche.
Welcome to
Mile High Hockey Lab.
Mile High Hockey Lab.